Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community Bookstore's virtual event series. My name is Noah Mintz. I'm the event coordinator at the bookstore, and Community Bookstore will be celebrating 50 years in business this fall. We credit the continued support of readers and writers for this milestone, so thank you for spending the evening with us. I'm thrilled today to welcome Robin McLean for her new novel, Pity the Beast, in conversation with John Larison. Now to some housekeeping, we've enabled Zoom's auto-transcribe settings, so if your version of Zoom is up to date, hit the live transcription button at the bottom of your screen to enable closed captions. If you have any questions for tonight's guests, please click on the Q&A button, also on the bottom of your screen, to submit them. We will be asking those at the end of the program, so please don't be shy. There's also a chat box through which I will be posting a link to buy tonight's book if you haven't already. And one caveat for tonight is that we're all at the mercy of our home internet connections, so please bear with any technical issues that might arise. We'll try to solve them quickly. We've scheduled a whole host of fall programming for you at Community Bookstore, so head over to our website, communitybookstore.net, sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date. One that I want to point out in particular is on Tuesday, November 16th. We're thrilled to welcome Rachel Kushner and translator Isabel Fargo Cole for a conversation about Wolfgang Hilbig's The Interim, newly published from Two Lines Press. That program is up on our website now and taking registrations. Now, a little about tonight's guests and we'll get started. Robin McLean worked as a lawyer and then a potter in the woods of Alaska before turning to writing. Her short story collection, Reptile House, won the 2013 BOA Editions Fiction Prize and was twice a finalist for the Flannery O'Connor Short Story Prize. She now lives and teaches in the High Plains Desert of Central Nevada at Ike's Canyon Ranch Writers Retreat, which she co-founded. And John Larison spent much of his childhood in remote regions of Australia, the Caribbean, Canada, the South Pacific, Alaska, and the American West before graduating from high school in Ithaca, New York. He studied philosophy and literature at the University of Oregon and became a renowned fly fishing guide ahead of earning an MFA from Oregon State University, where he stayed to teach while writing Whiskey When We're Dry. He lives with his family in rural Oregon. So now without any further ado, I'll hand it off to you. Robin, John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Noah.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you, Noah. I have the great pleasure here of getting to hang out with Robin. We've never met before, but I feel like I know Robin enough to know how fascinating she is from reading this book. And as just a brief introduction, I'll say that this book came to me kind of late in the summer, and I didn't think there was a chance I really could do this event tonight, just from the way my schedule was shaking out. And then I started to read this book, and I just fell in love with it so much. I read it not in one sitting. I savored it over the course of a week, but then I've been rereading it. My margins are all written up. This is like one of those rare books that is both challenging and rewarding in equal measure. And I'm just so excited to be here and get to ask Robin questions. Thank you, Robin, for writing Pity the Beast. And also, congratulations. I learned today that it was selected for the Indie Next list for November, which is just an incredible accomplishment, especially because your publisher doesn't come with the big guns of, to use Western metaphors, of a Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster. So that's just a testament to how many other people are falling in love with this book, and really just amazing. Well done. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here with you because I'm such a fan of your work. Whiskey When We're Dry is the best Western I've read in my modern times. I just love the book. It's for me, it's a shifting of the way people look at the Western, and it opens up a lot of opportunities for the rest of us. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for being here, and congratulations, because I know you got an Indie Next too. I found out about Indie Next because of you. So.
Well, for people who don't know, Indie Next is a great way to find out about new books that are coming out, because these are books that booksellers are reading and voting on. And, of all the hundreds of books that come out every week, only some of them, are selected for the Indie Next list. So great place to check out. Also, thank you. Before we dive in, I'll just say thank you for supporting your independent bookstores, because without independent bookstores, the only authors you'd ever learn about, the only new authors that would have any sort of career, would be the ones that Amazon selects, and we probably wouldn't like those books as much as we like the books that are selected by independent bookstores. So you'll see the link to buy Robin's book in the chat box. When you buy the book from an independent bookstore, you're not only supporting that bookstore, you're also supporting authors who wouldn't have a chance if Amazon was the only place to buy books.
Okay.
So please buy. I'll be buying Robin's book as well. I'm going to be sending lots of copies. Hey, so Robin, to start us off here, I was hoping to read just, actually, I'm going to save this question. I'm going to ask, would you read for us? Could we hear this, this voice in your voice?
Yeah, I'll read a little bit. I'm ready for you, John. I'm just going to read a little to start out with. So this is a Western. There's some traditional elements in it, and meaning there's a chase through the mountains. There's a woman who's running, being chased or searched for or hunted for, depending on what your perspective is, the characters. And one character, a woman, spends most of her time alone, and she spends a lot of time conversing with, her grandmother who's dead, who gives her a lot of advice. And I'm just going to read a little bit of a grandmother's advice to her granddaughter who needs to cross a river. So this is just a little bit. And this is for you, John, because I know you know a lot about rivers too. Granny told her dear ones, when crossing a stout river, a woodsman finds a calm place, a pool of sorts. Deep and slow is what he's looking for. But mark this, the woodsman never trusts the pool. He tests it. He flings a stick in to see how it floats, where the current takes it, reads the river. If the stick rolls in the sun, takes its time, lolls and stays, the second stick too, a third also, this one winged out as far as possible, then by all means, he rolls his cuffs up. But if the stick is spun and tipped or drowned, if it runs off like a tiny canoe, then the woodsman walks on upstream. He keeps on shore if terrain and foliage allow it. He wades if he can, feels the river on his hips or chest, depending on depth. He studies the river with all his senses. The river is many things. A trap for land creatures, a place of refuge for the webbed-footed, a tank for fish, a highway for boats, also a bridge to over there, to freedom, the world's most expensive item. He shades his eyes. How deep? Where are the hidden rocks, the sweepers? He watches the surface movements, marks them, since they indicate killing shifts below. He remembers fish live in calm currents, but also behind boulders where the water spins endless on itself and finless swimmers cannot get out. Upstream, the woodsman finds where the river widens. It always does. A place with riffles all the way across, with luck. That's the ticket. He wades in, and if the current takes him, that's fine too. He paddles with all his might and exits at a pool downstream he knows already. That's it.
Yeah. You know what I that's such a great sample for us from the book, because it contains so many of the different pleasures of the book for me. We have first this true wisdom of life that's contained in there. And so like every page of this book, there are these gems of like real wisdom that are hard won, that don't feel contrived, that really resonate as true. And they almost always grow out of authentic observations about people or the natural world. And, here you're describing a river. And I can tell as a reader that you know rivers. Like, it's not like, you're making this up. You know rivers, you know that they always widen. You have seen those places where the currents swirl behind the rock. And I have the sense, Robin, that when you're in those places, you're thinking about those places, but you're also thinking about, the wisdom that can be gained from these places and how to articulate that wisdom. And this book is just so full of those pleasures. And also, it is so often conveyed in this voice in the pages of the book that has the thrift of language that is that Western dialect, those truths about living that can only be said in the poetry, really, that is the language of rough places, gritty language. There's some truths about life that I feel like can only be said in that language, and this book is just so full of it. Hey, so I wanted to start my questions here, by reading just a line or two from page 333. This is something a character says, and Robin has no idea what questions I'm going to ask her tonight. So this is all shooting from the hip. But Bowman says on page 333, I operate at the outer boundaries of human nature. I study it. And that's just one of many of the sentences I underlined. I underlined it because I feel like that's something all serious novelists do, live at the outer boundaries of human nature. And as a way of introduction, I really know nothing about you, Robin. On the other hand, I feel like I know so much about you after reading the book. But I'm curious if you agree with that sentiment that serious novelists try to operate at the outer boundaries of human nature. And if so, how do you cultivate that position for yourself in your life?
Oh, that is a wonderful thing to ask. Thank you for asking that. I do agree with that because I believe that novel writing, serious novel writing, art is exploratory. For me, a serious book, the writer must be seeking something for themselves in writing it. It is, if it's a book that's been made before, you understand the plot line, the form that it's going to take. That is not exploration. So for me, yes, I agree with your idea, your proposal. For me, I have found myself living in very, very remote places since I was an adult. So I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, which is a pretty, Midwest. It's the Midwest. Caterpillar Tractor World Headquarters, Peoria, Illinois. A very nice family and kind family and all that kind of thing. And but I lived in Alaska for a long time, and I lived on the edge of what we would call civilization, meaning if you walked out my door, can you hear that dinging? It's like, it's really bothering me. If you walked out my back door, you could walk all the way to the Arctic Ocean and cross one road in that time. And there were bear on my hiking route, and moose and wolves, and no cell phones at that time. And now I live in a place where the natural world, like as in Alaska, the natural world is dominant, obviously the wrong word. It's commanding, and I feel small, and I prefer to be in places like that because I am forced to pay attention and to learn and to observe what you're talking about, what you're saying that you found in these pages of the wisdom of the natural world, what the natural world can teach us. I have sought that. And, so I feel like I've lived in pretty uncomfortable situations at times, because the benefit for being uncomfortable is worth it to me. And that poetry that you're talking about that exists in a Western culture, there's the book, as you know, is definitely an attempt to rework the Western, a little bit examine the Western and the motifs of a Western. But I hope it is also a love letter to the West, because the way truth or beauty or thought is articulated in the West through the characters who you meet or the beings that you encounter is poetry and wisdom. And so I'm glad that that is what struck you about the book, or one of the things that struck you about the book, because I am besotted with the West, the mountains, the people, all there is there that is way bigger than me, and that I can only spend my lifetime trying to absorb it. So I'm glad that that was the impression that you, or at least that question, and to live on the outside of, yeah, I mean, Bowman is a very extreme character. The characters in the book are sort of on a spectrum, and Bowman is on one end of the spectrum, and I respect him a lot. There's a lot of things that are problematic about Bowman or all the characters, but I have a lot of respect for him. So
I feel that in the pages, and other people who've read the book have pointed out how quickly these characters move between goodness and evilness, and really, that's yet another way that this novel is at play with the tropes of the Western. I feel like I definitely feel in the book that you have, obviously an affinity for the place, the landscapes. And I also feel, though, that you have a push-pull relationship with the Western itself, not the place, but the literary genre. And people might not know this, but the Western is America's first homegrown literary genre, and it took off because people in England loved these early stories about the American frontier, and it became this genre really shaped by certain tropes, and maybe at the heart of those tropes is this clear division between good and evil that we see in the Western. And the Western obviously becomes super problematic with John Ford and John Wayne as it becomes, political propaganda. But there's always been something comforting for me when I was a kid reading Westerns, that they imagined a world where there was clean divisions between good and evil. Your book totally challenges that. And also it does it, though, in this framework that is such on one hand, a classic Western framework. We have a injustice that occurs, and then we have some sort of journey and quest that on the face of it could look like a quest to right a wrong, even if future actions are abhorrent. I'm doing a bad job of describing this, but you blow up even that framework, right? And so I guess I have two questions for you here. One is, like, what is it about the Western that compelled you enough that you wanted to spend time in it? Because most American writers don't want to hang out with the Western. And then also, like, why do you feel like this fight with the Western that you've engaged in is important enough to be doing it right now in 2021? Like, why pick this fight with the Western now?
Well, I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to engage with the Western, because I think it's really fun. there's so much fun you can have in a Western. And I'm pretty agnostic on subject matter, and this story came in the way all my stories do, sort of randomly in a way. But I think Westerns are a blast. You guys have horses, and cowboys are smart and hilarious. They make these crazy jokes all the time. They're really, really smart, and they're really, really dumb. I mean, I just think it's a fantastically fun genre to play around in. And as far as why now, I think it's the most relevant time ever to explore the Western, because the Western myth, the myth of this Western, and the good, or the white hat, the black hat, the good, the evil, the clearly defined. We know that if someone does something bad, they must be the bad guy, because the good guys don't do bad things. Like it's a circular logic, but that is the logic of the Western. And in my view, that is, the Western has infused the American mind. The American way of thinking is absolutely rooted in the Western, and you can hear it in every part of culture now. And it goes broader than the United States, because the United States is influential everywhere, and the way we think about things is influential. And the Western is a myth, that the myth of the Western, how we operate in the West is just a global trope, even if people are not aware of it. So to me, I think it has to be examined now. And as there's, from the simple point of view of the women in this book are not static, waiting for the guys to come home, damsels kind of thing. Well, of course they're not, because as you know very well, the women of the West are total badasses and have been. And to have left them out as badasses and active members of what's going on is just not true. It's just been a cool thing that you can write stories about, that just hasn't been. I mean, there have been some, but I mean, mostly it's been left out. And then you think about these other entities and beings, other non-human beings or landscape, are always in Westerns, but they're just wallpaper in the Western. So I just think that there's this enormous opportunity in this genre that's really fun, and it's very, very relevant right now to shine some light on this idea. So that's what I tried to do. That's what I tried to do.
I think you succeeded. I'm somebody who's thought a lot about the Western, and you had me continuing to think about the Western in new ways. And so much of what you just said too really resonates and makes sense with problems I've been sort of thinking about that I trace back to the Western too. And audience members might not know this. You might, as an audience member, might not have read Westerns before, watched many Westerns, but when people were immigrating to the United States in the early 20th century, they were looking for models of Americanness, and Westerns were in every media form then. And so they really permeated the culture quickly. And a lot of lessons about Americanness, have come from these early Westerns and been passed down through the generations. So Robin, like, you talk about the myth of the Western being this male-dominated place, which is totally bogus if you've looked at the history of the West. Is there another sort of myth about the West that you feel like is, predominant, dominant in the culture, but it's phony when you look at the historical record?
Well, I mean, if you just think about westward expansion and who deserves to be on the land, and this idea of why we are here, meaning, a white person living in the middle of Nevada that used to have Pio Shoshone living where I lived and for thousands of years, that this is that there's these stories that that go with the Western, that go with the backdrop of the Western, what's assumed when a Western starts, you start turning the pages, or when you're watching a movie. There's certain things that are just assumed in many Westerns historically that are being re-examined now, of course. So there's that kind of thing. But one of the things that I'm really interested also in the book, which I think of the Western as a story, a narrative. And as you know, in the beginning of the book, one of the characters, Ella, begins a story that I viewed as weaponizing narrative, like weaponizing narrative. And if you repeat this narrative and people will join in and participate in the narrative, that it then is true, which is again, something that is happening in our world now that I'm quite worried about, because I think of story and narrative as a basic human function, a really, really important way that humans communicate with each other through time, and myths and fairy tales and stories have been central to how wisdom and some kind of civilized cooperation has always functioned, I believe, for humans. And if stories are getting perverted, or their use is being perverted so that they are no longer healthy objects for us to transact, I also thought maybe this book would be a way to experiment with how, because I didn't want to leave it with that, like stories are weapons, they're bad. So I feel like what also happened as the book goes on is that stories and how they function for all the characters hopefully became a different, not just looking in a way for the stories to be healthy, to be salubrious, to thought, to existence, to coexistence, not just within this group of people who are riding around in the wilderness, but within the other characters or the other beings that are there, that we have to think bigger than this Western myth or the myths that exist. We have to find a way to have bigger stories, more encompassing stories than just the straight narrative that is Western, is a really, really straight, quite predictable narrative structure that I do not think, it's just an example of one that I think is not working well.
Yeah, and in that answer, you've gotten at this this quality of the book that was just so refreshing for me as I read it. The human characters in the book are on equal footing with the animal characters. And the humans do get a bit more page space, maybe, but we don't trust the humans more than we trust the animals in the book. And even in the phrasing of your answer, you use the phrase "the humans." Narrative, narrative is something the humans use. I have the sense that you really wisely, I think of humans as being just another animal species on the landscape. And there's a moment in the book, another place I'll read briefly. This is on page 357. I'll keep to the animal thought myself from now on. You try it. Go back to it. All else is translation. All translation is never right. All approximation. I'll keep to the animal thought, this character says. And I guess on every page, I feel like Pity the Beast is a meditation on the division and overlaps between humans and other species. And I'm curious, like, what roles do animals play in your life? Like, what kind of interactions do you have with animals? And why do you feel like this inquiry into the relationship between humans and animals is so important now. When we meet over Zoom, it's a 5G existence. Why ask these questions now?
Well, we ask the questions now because we're on Zoom in a 5G existence. And if all the Zoom went away today, boom, it's gone. All the cars, they couldn't run anymore. The power goes down. We have massive impact on us, but for the natural world, there's no impact. We're living in a false reality now where we can simply forget about this planet full of other beings. We're now narrowed down to these little windows where I'm looking at you, you're in Oregon, I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we think that we're in control of everything. And of course, that is insane. We're not, and we're living in an insane idea. And if I have to point that out in a book, that's kind of sad, but I guess I will, because the natural world is existing all the time without us, and it will proceed. And to me, I live, your answer about how I interact with animals, I coexist with animals. We live in one of the most remote places in the lower 48 states, 40 miles from a pavement. The pavement is called the loneliest road in America. There's the size of Rhode Island with about 5 people in it. So I'm a minority there. There's wild horses walking around. There's antelope walking around, and they, I believe, view me kind of the way I view them. Like, oh, there's some humans over there. Like they live their lives. They're not in zoos. They're not pets. They're not ridden. They're just living. And you can see that they're living their life. And I feel like a lot of humans do not get to see that. The natural world that they interact with is tame. And there's a lot of time, both before and after us, that the non-human animals are doing just fine, or they're doing the best they can. If you're a polar bear, not so, but so yeah, it's just what's in front of me. Somebody who's living in Rome might be writing about the Colosseum, but I live where there's wild horses walking over my head in my little bunker where I write, and they tromp around up there, and I am irrelevant to them, and I prefer to be irrelevant to them. And yet we are the ones that we're impacting them more than the other way around. So I just want, you write what you're interested in, and that's what I'm interested in. One of the things I'm interested in.
Right. And then I think also, though, on the page, we can feel, just in the structure of the book and the structure of the language, we can feel these things that you might not be aware of yourself, like you might not give articulation to them in your daily life, but to those of us who maybe are living in a different reality, seeing the world through this narrator's eyes is just really shocking and refreshing in so many ways. And one of them is this way that the animals have their own wisdom in the book, and it doesn't feel like a gimmick in the pages of the book. It feels real and significant. It's just remarkable. It's yet another remarkable element of the book, and I think readers will really find it pleasing as they read this book. A fish can't tell you about the water, right? But as a reader swimming around in these pages, you leave it with this really changed perspective on the role of humans in the world. Part of that, not to go on too long here, but part of that is the time span that this book traverses. We open thousands of years ago, and through these ingenious narrative constructions, we end up, far in the future as well. And so always, things are positioned honestly in the pages of the book, which is just, incredible. You mentioned your bunker, and I'd love to know about your bunker and your sort of daily writing process. If you have a daily writing process, maybe you don't, maybe you're a binge writer or something, but I'd love to hear about your how you went about writing this book.
Well, I try to write real consistently when I'm working on something. Then, as you know, probably you get real busy, and we all have a day job, and you have things you have to do and go off. I've taught a lot of writing. But when I can, what I do is I go to the most remote place that I can possibly find within the life that I'm living at that time. That's either Alaska or it was a little cabin on a lake, frozen lake in New Hampshire for about 5 winters, where I can have silence, and I have to have silence. And so when I moved out to Nevada to work on this novel, it just so happened that there was this earth-bermed root cellar that had been built by a lot of people, and it was empty. And I moved in, and it's the most remote place that you can get at the most remote place that you can get. And there's something for me that allows to go the places where the book required me to go. And I know everybody's got a different process that way, but for me, silence and beauty and some kind of, I worry about the world a lot, John. I get real worried about the world. I find it very worrisome, and I get relief from that in this really remote place, and this beauty where it's not exactly the way it was 10,000 years ago, but it's probably not far off. That's how I lived in Alaska too. You looked across this valley and you basically know that this is how it has been and it will be. And that is a comfort to me. And I like that very much. So I move to the places where I need to go for, it's sometimes inconvenient in your life to have to be in places like that. But this book was real important to me, and a sort of a compulsion to try to move through it. And that's what I needed. So that's where I was and am.
Great answer. What you said reminded me of another passage on page 260.
I was going to read it, John. Think.
Oh, you were? Oh, can you? Could you?
I was going to read it to you. I was going to read that. It starts on 259, I think. So for those of you out there who don't know this book yet, like John does, with fiction, in normal life, you try to avoid problems, but in fiction, you send your characters into terrible problems. And by about 260, every bad thing that could happen has happened, and shit has hit the fan. And when that happens, a person needs to kind of think like, how can I pull myself up by my bootstraps and keep going? And one of the characters named Saul, who's sort of a very smart guy, he knows how to do everything. He's very trustworthy in a lot of ways about wisdom. But this is a little speech that he gives about how he deals with trouble. Would you say that's right, John?
I would, yeah. And it was a moment that I have dog-eared and have written down all over the place. So I'm so glad that you're going to read this for us.
Okay. So this is Saul speaking about how to deal with trouble. In short, as I've told Ella, his wife, when your life gets all confused, off kilter, and you know you've got nothing to be proud of, mistakes were made, well, step back from the small. For example, We think we see these mountains around us, don't we? Those peaks there seem so solid. The most real, most immovable objects we can observe or think about in a lifetime. Well, that notion I see now is a lie. Instead of still and solid, those mountains are purest action, crystalline fluid movement. True, they're a visible solid surface, but there's also proof of false intersecting below, reflecting only the smallest hint of the tumult, the titanic subsurface battles that dwarf any human action, idea, or existence. It's a matter of scale and vision. Bowman is big on this. What I think is, to God, a mountain is a liquid wave that breaks over 10 million years, not a tenth of one of his seconds. Can you see the wave now? Not stone at all. The trick to peace of mind, to heaven on earth, to surviving suffering is to see the mountain as God would. Molten rock caught in an illusion of stillness by the limits of the human retina. I'm trying to say, think big in times of crisis. Just as your mind wants to cave in, move past what you think you can't move past. Then think bigger, expand, look onward to the grand scale.
Right on.
Right
Thank you
on.
for that. That's so good. You know, there's just so much wisdom in that, and it's so timely now, especially. And yeah, I just took comfort from those pages as I read them in my little office. You know, I put the book down, walked around, thought about it, and I was just, yeah, just so impressed, Robin. Hey, so we're going to open this up shortly to audience questions. But first, I was wondering if you could, feel free to punt on this one if you want. But what next for you? Do you have a project in the works? Maybe you don't. Maybe you just have some, some concerns you're thinking about that maybe will someday grow into a book. I'm just curious, what trail are you riding right now?
Okay, well, I have another book coming out with the fabulous and other stories that you can buy at community bookstore. Please do. It's not coming out for a little while, but actually that book was written before this book was written. This was the beginning of this book was the first story of a second story collection. But that one's, in the bag, I guess. I'm going to have to edit it and stuff like that. But I started a couple of other projects pretty much as soon as this was done. And I hope to return to both of them or one of them, well, probably one at a time, but I was also kind of experimenting with writing both of them at the same time. And the pandemic slowed down this particular book. There was this lull in publishing during the pandemic. And so I actually worked on a screenplay. I worked on a screenplay for my first collection, which a story called Cold Snap, which is it's a pretty, I'll just say it's a really good story. And anyway, I wrote a screenplay. So I did that. And I might write another screenplay, but I hope to get back to these two novels because I didn't really think of myself as a novel writer. I thought of myself as a short fiction writer. And so the scope, the size of this thought, because I think of this book as a thought, and you have to do whatever you need to do to make that thought happen. So I don't believe in all the genre discussion, really. Like, you have to do what you have to do to make the thought complete. And so I've had some time to sort of let those two novels marinate, percolate, and I expect I'll be back with them pretty soon. I hope to anyway, in my little bunker, and you can come visit. And But yeah, that's what I'm working on.
Awesome. Are they, can I ask, are they also set in the American West, or what, do you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, they're both set kind of where I am now. So this novel, Pity the Beast, is a more of Northern Rockies because that's where it started. Actually, the story that inspired the book was in Alaska, but I moved it down when I realized that this would be a very good subject matter for a Western. Like Alaska has more of a frontier, as you know, more of a frontier sort of myth. And the West is Western myth is related to it. It's a cousin or a sister or something, but it's different. And so I moved it from Alaska to where the mountains are not really very hospitable towards horsepacking a lot of the time. So I moved it down sort of Northern Rockies. The two books that I'm working on now are more in this high desert landscape that I'm in love with at the moment. The desert and the land, you can see the land and these incredible beings that can survive in this unbelievably intensely hard landscape. That's where they are right now. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I look forward to buying those books too. And what's the name of the book that's going to come out from End Up the Stories?
Right now it's called Get 'Em Young, Treat 'Em Tough, Tell 'Em Nothing, which is a really long title, which I love that title. So we're playing with the title. It could be a different title, but right now that's what it is. Get 'Em Young, Treat 'Em Tough, Tell 'Em Nothing, which my grandmother used to say to us. It was also a song. So
It's great. It makes me want to buy that book, just the title. So I'm going to ask some questions now from the audience, and if anybody wants to type questions into the Q&A, go for it. The first one here is a question about that arises from all the good and evil that happens in the story, and mostly from the evil that happens in the story. And this is a story that has that does not flinch from violence, right? There's a lot of really heavy subject matter in the book. And for me, I'll just say that at one point when I was reading the book, I had to put it down and leave it for a while, just to sort of process. And in that way, the book, is challenging like life is. And this reader had a similar experience. And the question is, how do you maintain respect for these people who've done bad things? How do you love them? Characters like Dan, Saul, Ella, after the bad things that happen in the early part of the book?
It's hard to do. It was hard for me to do. I feel like in this exploration, which is what you do when you're writing, you are challenging yourself. And so that was one of the hardest things, because I do not condone in any way any of the bad stuff that happens in the book. However, if you, I feel like this is sort of a craft question in some ways, is that if you write a book, in my opinion, where everyone is just good or evil, it is not a very good book. It is not realistic. Do not believe that people are only good or only evil. I don't know any people like that. I certainly am not like that. And so you are challenged with this. I do not think of myself as a particularly realist writer. However, you have to employ everything, which includes realism, which your characters are not all horrible. People would stop reading if that's it. I think about Beowulf, Grendel, John Gardner did this with Grendel, like examined the monster. We are fascinated with monsters in our culture right now. Monsters are in, zombies are in. Why are monsters so in? I think people are interested in evil. I am certainly very interested in evil. Why people do evil things. And I'm really interested in this. I do not tolerate the idea of this. It's those people doing all the evil and I am not doing all the evil. I really want that to be an idea of the past because it does not serve the future at all, in my opinion. So yeah, it was really hard, very, very hard. And it possibly was the hardest thing about writing this book. And there were a lot of hard things for me about writing this book, but I was very committed to doing that.
A good answer. Thank you. So one person here has asked about music, and if music plays a part in your writing process. Is there a playlist?
Oh yeah, there's just a playlist got posted today. I got, there's a cool website called The Large Hearted Boy. I don't know if you know about them, but I got asked to write a playlist for the book. And as you may know, I mean, maybe this is different for you, but when these wonderful small publishers, I mean, for me as a small publisher, but these people who are committed to your book and want your book to go well, ask you to make a playlist for like basically sort of a soundtrack, if it was a film, I said, oh yeah, when do you need it? So it was published today. In the introduction to that essay, I say that I did not use any music while I was writing because I am a pro-silence person. I'm pro-silence. But this book really, really lends itself very well to all kinds of songs. So the playlist is variable, but you know, it's like a mountain range of types of music, but of course, Johnny Cash is in there, and Iris the Mint is in there, and the Rolling Stones are in there, and yeah, it's good. It's out there. Check it out.
Nancy Foley asks, one thing I loved about this book was that it was often unexpectedly hilarious. The things the characters would say to each other, their patter in the mule train. Do you think this came about via playing with the Western genre, or is it more a sensibility that just runs through all your writing?
I personally think all of my stories are really funny, all of them. Whether other people think that they're really funny, I cannot, you know, speak for them, but I think that I enjoy humor, and I think people are really funny. And I think that you can manage to look at really, really difficult subject matter, evil, for example, or why we are violent to other people and beings all the time as entertainment, because think about what people like, or a lot of, you know, you think James Bond, or, you know, the Die Hard movies where you have a plane blow up and all these people die and we just move on, you know, to the next thing. And but I'm interested in the people who get wiped out on the wayside. I'm interested in the beings, and if you're gonna get into that stuff, you've got to counterbalance it some way. And I think humor is a really excellent way to do it, and I think it's absolutely possible to do it. Uh-oh, the phone's ringing here. Sorry. But yeah, so I think all of my stuff is really funny, and I think this book is really. I mean, there's a bunch of cowboys and they're riding around, and I think they're really hilarious myself. So hopefully other people see that too. I cracked myself up while I was reading it, certain parts. So, and if you're alone in a bunker, you have to crack yourself up. So.
That's another great answer. This is from an anonymous attendee. Which sometimes means they're the best questions. I'm really curious about the sci-fi futuristic sections of your book. Where did those come from? They're so fascinating and something I've never seen a Western do. It seems like the persistence of nature you just mentioned has something to do with it, but can you tell us more?
Yeah, sure. Well, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing at all while I'm writing. I feel like I'm lost. If anyone out in the world listening to this thinks about if you've ever had to find yourself, in the woods, in the forest, the mountains, and you're lost. That's how I felt pretty much the whole time that I was writing this book. And when you're lost, you're paying attention. You see a marker here, a marker there, you pay attention to it. And when I write, I have these things that arrive, and I have absolutely no idea why they're there. And I think of them as, in a lot of writing settings, if you have a motif or some idea that comes in and it doesn't obviously fit, you would just discard it. But I do not do that. I do not discard. I keep things over there like a puzzle piece that you really would like to know where it fits, but you can't put it in until the other parts are there, and then it fits in. And the cedar census, which I call those sections, the cedar census, where there's a movement into the future, into the far future, for me, were one of those parts that I just arrived, and they stayed with the story for the whole time. And it dropped in eventually. But for me, this idea that the story is a genre, and that the future part is somehow antithetical to the main genre, is not how I view it. I view that the idea that I'm trying to convey by this entire book required some time in the future, because I'm interested in the deep past, and that's a lot of easier for people in some ways. We have geology to tie us to that, or history, or we call history to tie us to that. But to me, to move into the future as well simply balances that, because I want the size of the idea to be bigger than these people riding around in the mountains, pissed off at each other, to put it lightly. I wanted the idea, which is Pity the Beast, to be bigger than that, and they required everything, including the future. So that's my.
Yeah. Hey, I think we have time for one more question here, and we have about 3 more minutes, Robin. There's a person asking about your writing seminars and retreats that you mentioned, and she's curious if you have any of those coming up, if you might say a few words about them.
Yeah, well, we had a bunch lined up for last summer. Of course, the COVID, we do them at the ranch, but we also like going to cool places, like we've been to Prague and Crete and things like that. And we're hoping to set up something at the ranch this summer, but we do not, because coming summer, we don't have anything on there because we don't know what will happen with COVID. But if you just go on the website and just check it, or become put your little email in there, then you'll get the info when we have it. And hopefully we're trying to get a trip planned to Scotland next summer. And we're always looking for other people to come run the workshops with us, John. So just saying. But yeah, it's really beautiful out there. And we have a saloon that I just think is the best place in the whole world to have a writing workshop, is in this saloon, this crazy saloon with all this weird, crazy saloon stuff. And it's wild. It's a wild place. And it's glorious. So yeah, come on out to Ike's Canyon. There's Noah.
Hey guys, thank you so much for this. This is such a treat for me. As I said, I love the book. Everyone should get a copy from Community Bookstore if you don't already have it. So thank you both so much for this, and everyone at home, thank you for your very thoughtful, insightful questions. We hope to see you at another virtual event soon. Thanks again, Robin and John.
Thank you, Noah. And everybody, don't forget to buy the book from Noah. Get on that website and buy that book. Thank you.
Everyone come through Community Bookstore next time you're in Brooklyn.
John, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. This has been so fun and really a amazing book. I can't say enough about it. I'll be recommending it to everybody. I think this is a book we'll be talking about for a lot of years.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Good night. Take care.